state your name and the branch of service.
Adam Wallace, U.S. Army.
Do you have a rank?
I got out as a specialist,
Okay.
E4.
And then where did you serve? If you did serve abroad?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I served. I joined the reserves in 2007 and was in a unit outside of Chicago. And then in 2010, I deployed to Afghanistan, and I was there for about a year from 2010 to 2011, and ended up getting out of service about 2012.
Why did you decide to join the military?
So I joined the military because of my grandfather. My grandfather was a huge influence on me. He served as an engineer in the Korean War back in the 50s. And so I always looked up to him, and he's my inspiration of why I joined the service. And I've always wanted to join, even as far as I can remember. When I was in kindergarten, I had this camo hat, and I still have it to this day. And it's all beat up, and because I wore it every day. And so as far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to join the Army.
Awesome. All right. Do you recall what your first days in service felt like?
Well, so my first days, in basic training, just a little uneasy, a little nervous, a little scared, didn't really know what to expect. You get off the bus and all the drill sergeants are yelling at you, telling you to do this and do that. And no matter what, if you do it right or do it wrong, you still did it wrong, so they can sit there and make you do push-up. But then my time in the reserves was good. Once we were done with basic training, you would only go and serve 1 weekend a month and a couple weeks throughout the year. But then in 2010, when I deployed to Afghanistan, those were a little more interesting first days. So I remember walking off the plane on the tarmac, getting into Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan, and just didn't know what was going to happen, didn't know how it was going to be. So just a lot of, I was pretty scared going in there. So,
Going back to boot camp, what is one thing that you will never forget?
One thing I will never forget about boot camp. That's a good question. I would say probably just some of the fun and games I would say that we had in the barracks. Because it's all fast paced, fast training, and you're training from sun up to sundown or more at sometimes. And so to kind of de-stress and have the camaraderie with your fellow people and fellow service members in basic training, we found ways to keep ourselves entertained with, didn't have cell phones or anything like that to try and entertain ourselves, no TV. So just the way that we had fun and enjoyed each other through a difficult time.
Are you still in touch with anybody from basic training?
I happened to go to basic training with my best friend since high school. So we both joined out of high school. We both went to basic training together, and we actually both ended up deploying to Afghanistan together. So obviously I'm in touch with him and several others too through Facebook and social media.
Where was the basic training located?
I did my basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So middle of nowhere, Missouri. It was miserable.
From basic training, is there a story that you seem to tell people from over and over from that time?
I think the one takeaway story from basic was about 2 weeks before I was supposed to be done and graduated from basic training. We were doing a practice physical fitness test, and I actually, getting off the truck, I broke my foot. It was a minor fracture in my foot, and the options I had were to stay there and let it heal for 6 to 8 weeks and then take my physical training test and then graduate, or the option that I took is I kind of nursed my foot around for 2 weeks and ran a 2-mile physical training test on a broken foot and passed.
Oh, wow. That is incredible. Yeah. What is your favorite food from the mess hall?
Well, the little what they called fatty cakes. So they would have the desserts, and you would have to be pretty bold to actually go there. Obviously I'm a bigger guy and just bigger frame all my life, and so a person sized like me going and grabbing the cakes and the brownies brought much scrutiny from the drill sergeants, I'll say.
Really? Man.
Yes.
Um, so while you were deployed in Afghanistan, what was your job assignment?
So I had a pretty interesting job over there. I my first couple months, I actually worked at the prison where they detained enemy combatants or enemy prisoners of war. And then after my first couple months, we were actually charged with training the Afghan army on correctional, prison operations.
Can you tell me more about that?
What would you like to know?
I really didn't realize that that was a thing.
Yes.
Um, what would walk me through a little bit of that process,
Sure.
if you can.
So the general process is while fighting out there, if an enemy combatant was captured, then they would be brought to some sort of localized collection point, processed, fingerprinted, and all that, and then they would be transferred to our prison facility just outside of Bagram, Afghanistan. So we'd go to the airfield, meet a plane, go bring them back to the prison, process them in, and then that's where they would be detained. So, like I said, the first couple months we worked in the prison, and I had prior correctional experience to that. So we'd bring them. First couple months we would work just to get acclimated and familiar with the facility, and then we were charged with actually training the Afghan army how to be a prison guard essentially, and how to maintain that facility.
That's really interesting. Um,
So to expound a little bit more, so I was usually we ran in 3 to 4 week cycles, and I was in charge of anywhere from 12 to 15 Afghan army soldiers, and so I would be training them. First I would work, and then they would observe, and then I would observe while they worked, and all the communication that we did was through interpreters, obviously because of the language barrier. Very few of them spoke English. So all of our training and everything was done through interpreters.
Thank you for telling me about that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a couple of your most memorable experiences over there?
It was all pretty memorable in one fashion or another. One of the bigger events that happened while I was over there. So I was there 2010, 2011, and May 2010 is when Osama bin Laden was killed. And so to be over there during that time was a very unique experience. At that point, the U.S. had almost been, just about shy of a decade had been involved in that war in that country. And to be there while, the mastermind of 9/11 was, finally taken out by U.S. forces, is a lot of emotions from us, and celebrations and general happiness. Unfortunately, what followed that was increased attacks by the Taliban in retaliation. So that was also memorable in its own right.
And this doesn't have to be in the video, but was that something that you saw firsthand?
What?
The retaliation.
Oh, well, I mean, they increased mortar attacks, increased rocket attacks on our bases and stuff like that. So most of my time was spent in the facility. So I wasn't like out on patrols or anything, but we were, occasionally struck by what they called indirect fire. So that would be like a mortar or a rocket fired at the base. And so after bin Laden was killed, there's a large increase of attack. Also to include, I didn't have to experience it, but there was, a lot of uneasiness about attacks and retaliation by the Afghan army attacking us because of that. And that did happen around the country while I was there, but fortunately, nothing personally I had to deal with that.
How large was the base that you were at?
Well, I was in a little satellite base outside of Bagram. So Bagram Air Base was actually the largest U.S. base, and it's actually a multinational force base. But the Bagram Air Base was the largest base in Afghanistan, and we were about a 20-minute drive outside of Afghanistan in a small camp called Camp Sabula Harrison. And I would have to estimate uh, probably in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 2,000 troops were at that base, and it was a relatively little small
Oh, wow.
operation.
Oh.
But Bagram, probably thousands or tens of thousands of people
Okay.
stationed there because that's where most of your major operations were based out of in that region.
Okay.
hmm
Okay. So when your service ended, what did you do in the days and weeks after?
Well, we got back. My first uh, trip, I took a trip to Las Vegas, actually. Me and four of the guys decided to do a little R&R immediately following. So the first trip that we took within a few weeks coming back was actually Las Vegas, and we all had a fun time, of course. But actually, one of the first things I did when I got back from Afghanistan, actually the month I got back was October of 2011. I actually joined the VFW. So Vegas and VFW were top of my list.
I love it. What were the things that you're most looking forward to when you're coming home?
Just seeing family and just being back home. You know, experiences vary on deployments overseas and in combat zones. I was fairly fortunate with my experience. Well, a lot of people had a lot of worse jobs than I did, but still being in that area, has its own stressors and being away from your family for months at a time. And at the time I was, when I went over, I was 20 years old, had my 21st birthday in Afghanistan. And so, that was the first really long time I'd been away. It was the first time I've ever been out of the country. So just getting back home and getting to see my family again was what I was looking forward to most. And just not being in Afghanistan. That was a highlight.
Yeah. Was there anything that you were hesitant about coming home?
I don't think so. There was nothing. The process of coming back was easy enough. Looking back, I wish I would have paid attention to a few more things in my transition because when we got back to our demobilization station, the goal is just to get home as fast as possible. So that's one thing now in the VFW. I definitely advocate for veterans as they're transitioning out, whether it's from a deployment or transitioning out of service, that they make sure that they're honest and upfront. And, if it holds you back for a couple days to get the proper treatment and care that you need, they make sure, I make sure I encourage that for our transitioning service members.
Next question. Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or the general military?
I would say yes. Being involved in that, and also being over there while bin Laden was killed to kind of see, I guess, the investment and the outcome of that. Coming into it, you have no idea what Afghanistan's like. You have preconceptions about what the people are like. And I think one of the biggest takeaways that I had was working with the Afghan forces. A good majority of them wanted their country, and probably still to this day want their country to be successful and to be a place where they can be free and, enjoy the freedoms that we do. And I think that was an eye opener working with the Afghan army to really see that they wanted the best for their country. And I think that was very admirable. And that was kind of surprising to me.
When you were in Afghanistan, was Did you ever interact with any of the citizens besides the army, the Afghan army?
And I had very limited interaction with some of the visitors for some of the prisoners, but
Okay.
not particularly.
Um, how did your service and experiences affect your life?
It, you know, it's my entire life really at this point. Now being involved with the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the VFW, I could not be a member of the VFW had I not been overseas and served. Um, some of the job opportunities I've had in the past are because of some of the advantages of service. And so it's really, I've become, you know, day and night, whether it's my job now with the VFW or in the evening time when I volunteer for the VFW, even locally here at the Stoughton Post, it's all about veteran service and also serving the community. So it's really been the biggest influence in my life, I'd say.
Um, is there anything that you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
Just that, service today might not have a great optic with some of the outside political influences, but it really boils down to stepping up and serving for a greater purpose than yourself. And military service is certainly not for everybody, but the experiences that you get, the life experiences that you get, and the benefits that you get because of your service while you're in and after, it's just so valuable to be a part of something greater than yourself and to serve something greater than yourself and all of the benefits that come with it. So, if anybody ever considers service, whether it's military service, government service, it's always good to be contributing to something larger than yourself.
Was there anything that made it easier for you to transition home?
Yeah, so I got back in 2011 and joined the VFW, and I joined with my grandfather at his post in Illinois, and then I didn't really become active at all for the first couple years, and I ended up going to college at Northern Illinois University. Decided and found out that college was not really for me, and so a lot of stuff caught up with me. It was in a really not great place, a really bad place, and my way of dealing with that and really kind of completing that transition was to get hooked up with the VFW. And I found some great leaders and great mentors. One Vietnam guy, his name's Paul Collenbeck, just a veteran, would take guys driving to Chicago an hour away for appointments for the VA. And so that's where I kind of found myself was at a VFW. And for me, it was more than a bar. It was that camaraderie and the guidance and the friendship that I needed to really kind of get integrated back into civilian life.
Thank you. Can you tell me a little bit more about the VFW community in Stoughton?
Sure. So the Stoughton VFW, for a little bit of history, our post number is 328. It's not the lowest post number in the state, and the posts are numbered by when you are incorporated. So there's a post 305 in Eau Claire, and we're 328, but our paperwork hit the desk of the national commander first in 328. So we're actually the oldest chartered post in the state of Wisconsin. We're over 100 years old. We're the same age. We're one of the founding members of the state. The state, we're on our 102nd year now. And so Stoughton is the similar timeline since it was here since the beginning of the incorporation of the VFW in the state. So that's a little history on the VFW, but the veteran or the Stoughton VFW community itself, when you go in, your active members, typically on most posts, your active members are Vietnam era or Vietnam age veterans who are now, a young Vietnam veteran, I think, is like 70 or 71. And so you think of most VFWs as now, a bunch of old guys sitting around a smoky bar drinking beer. And Stoughton, it's far from that case. If you were to go to a meeting in Stoughton, you're going to see mostly 30 to 50-year-olds, mostly working family people with wives, children, lives, jobs, and they take the time to serve again in the VFW. And not only are they serving in the VFW, they're out there in the community. Like I said, it's not this internal closed door post. We're open to the public and we embrace the public. We want the public there, and we want to turn around and support the community as much as they do and have supported us in the past. And so we're a younger, more active, more community-oriented VFW than maybe you've remembered in the past, either here or other places around the state. Yeah.
Can you tell me how someone like Rob gets elected?
So to be a post commander, you have to be first nominated, and then if somebody nominates you or enters your name in, then they actually have to run an election. And so then whoever is nominated for post commander, they run against each other, and the post membership votes of who they want them or who they want to be leading them as a post. And Rob was elected back in April and installed in May as the post commander for 328. And yeah, he's been kicking butt ever since. Mm-hmm. Did I get that right? Is this your first year still, right?
Yep.
Okay.
First year as commander.
Great. Okay. I'm making sure I have the timeline correct. But yeah, so they're elected to serve as a leader for us, and you get elected based on what your goals are, how you want the VFW to go, and clearly with Rob leading us, we've shown that we want an active VFW. We don't want to sit at a bar and get drunk and drink cheap beer. That's not why we're joining, and that's not why we're coming to this VFW. Myself, I actually transferred just last month. Used to be in Madison Post. I just moved to Stoughton a few years ago, and if we didn't have leaders like Rob or Jordan or Mel or some of the other post leaders that we have, I probably wouldn't have transferred. But they're leading by example. This is Stoughton VFW is what a VFW should look like.